Libertarian Party versus GOP? We're trying to win hearts and minds? Or are we trying to win elections? Let's talk about that.
Focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Oh, Liberty folks, this is an episode for you. Yes, it is, because if you've been on social media, specifically over on the world of the new Elon Musk Twitter, yes, all of us rejoice. You've inevitably seen the conversation. What are we doing right now with the Libertarian Party versus the GOP? What's the best way to advance liberty? All that is being focused right now on the microcosm of Arizona, with right now the Libertarian candidate running for US Senate dropping out to endorse his rival, in that case, the Republican, but is he a rival? And we're going to talk about that. But first, we're going to go ahead and give a shout out to today's sponsor, and that is, yes, to all of you candidates out there, but also to all of you small and medium-sized business owners. And it is specifically when you're trying to face the challenges of making an impact on the digital landscape. Right strategies are going to be your proven partner to help not only change the impact of your elections for the positive, but also change the way your business will go ahead and find success. Head over to briannicholsshow.com/RS, and you're going to be able to get, not just if you're a candidate, a free campaign report card, but also if you're a business owner, a free marketing report card. See where you're at. If you want to figure out how you're doing right now as you're going out trying to reach new customers or reach new voters, what a great opportunity. So head to briannicholsshow.com/RS. Let Morgan and the team over at Right Strategies know that I sent you. Other than that, folks, if you're trying to amplify your message to find your voters and your customers where they spend your time, head to briannicholsshow.com/RS to learn more. All right. So for today's episode, I can't do this myself. So I called in some backup. I reached out to the Brian Nichols Show team, and joining us, yes, we have returning from Cody's Concerns, Kenny Cody, and then also joining us for the first time in seemingly forever, because he's been busy playing the role of dad and moving, Jeremy Todd from Sell Liberty. Welcome back, everybody. But hold on, Kenny. Jeremy, where have you been? Are you okay? What's new? Please blink twice if you can hear me. It's all good.
All good. I am currently being held captive in the this land of Florida, the Villages, by old people and retirees everywhere. And no, it's been a great time being down here with family and relocating to the Northern Kentucky area, Thomas Massey's district, which is just fantastic. And yeah, life is starting to settle into a bit of a rhythm, which is great.
There you go, man. And hey, I mean, you're setting me up to start things off. Man, it sounds like you're in these pretty nice Liberty GOP areas. You're living in Thomas Massey's area. You're hanging out in Florida with Ron DeSantis. And hey, that's the conversation right now we're seeing over on social media. Jeremy, Kennedy, thank you guys for joining to talk about this, because let's kind of focus where this is taking place over in Arizona. Now, Jeremy, this is your home state. Well, is it your actual home state?
No, born and raised, sweet home Alabama. When my wife graduated from vet school, we had to pick somewhere to go. And while we were still young and childless, we decided, let's go out west, see what it has to offer, enjoy ourselves out there. And we spent the last 3 years in the Phoenix metro area.
And so we had the GOP candidate who's running for office out there, and that is one Blake Masters. Now, Blake Masters was, I guess he used to identify himself, Kenny, help me out here, as a Rothbardian. Is that fair?
Yeah, he basically said that his dad gave him Mises and Rothbard as a child. It was some of the readings that he first started out with, and that's kind of the basis of his political thought. You know, on Marc Victor's show, he basically talked about how he was raised on those sorts of values, was, you know, Human Events and a bunch of other different books that his father gave him. I mean, he was basing a lot of his political philosophy off of he was raised on those values.
And Marc Victor, you mentioned Marc. So Marc was the Libertarian candidate for Senate out in Arizona. Now, we say was because he just recently dropped out of said election and has gone ahead and endorsed Blake Masters. Now, to be fair to the framing of Blake Masters, he has not only rejected a lot of the ideas he says he once held, but has gone ahead and, yes, taken a very rah-rah MAGA approach, which, if you're looking at the traditional GOP that is today, I kind of get it, especially when Kari Lake is the candidate that's running at the top of the ticket there in Arizona as
the governor candidate. There's Cell Liberty. Nice, Jeremy.
Hey.
But also, yeah, I like that. But also one thing I think it's interesting to see is that not only has Marc Victor endorsed Blake Masters, but also Rand Paul. So, I mean, two of the most noted sitting libertarians in either the House or the Senate, even though they're not necessarily big L libertarians. I think that does carry some weight. So I'm torn a little bit, right? So let me start things off here. And Jeremy, I'll let you maybe take the ball first, and then we'll let Kenny respond, because we're seeing this is the libertarian dropping out. So a lot of libertarians are up in arms. They're saying, what the hell, man? And rightfully so, I would say, in terms of, hey, you were running as a libertarian. If you're not going to run, don't run. I get that. Right. And I would say in the tone of the election, and I hate the rhetoric, the most important election of our lifetimes, but after what we all just went through the past 2.5 years, kind of feels like it might be, up there in importance and significance. So, Jeremy, hit me with some of your feels here. Like, what are you feeling? Not only just being a libertarian, but also specifically somebody who has some vested interest being a former Arizona resident.
Yeah. Well, let me start off with kind of the blanket answer to this. If I still lived in Arizona, I would vote for Blake Masters. I probably would have voted for Blake Masters, even if Marc Victor had stayed in the race. Okay. Like there is some reality to existing in a purple state. I don't think there's necessarily a lot of fuss about who that this guy isn't worthy of a vote from a libertarian in this very specific situation, with Marc Victor being the other candidate, where a lot of the and don't get me wrong, listen, I'm speaking for me. There are a lot of libertarians who have, especially in the LP, they have their own little vested interests, and they're all kind of playing some sort of game. Where my real rub comes in is when it is trying to figure out and discover where exactly do we draw this line of who we avoid, who we don't compete with, and who deserves the endorsement of people in the liberty movement and circle. And for me, while he may have earned a vote based on situation, he would not have necessarily earned an endorsement, because an endorsement is it means like I stand behind this person's policies, choices, decisions. I just like it did not meet that threshold for me with Blake Masters. While he said a lot of good things, and Brian, I don't know if you can pull it up. If you pulled up his website, there's zero departure from Ron DeSantis. There's zero departure from Ted Cruz. There's zero departure from Donald Trump, which are people that if they tried to run as a libertarian, we would exile. Like everybody within our party would say, this person does not meet the standards needed in order to represent and call themselves a libertarian. So then why would we endorse somebody like that? And so, we'll start there. I think there's like an on the issues, type piece. There's our first one. And ultimately, my opinion of Blake Masters is that he is a rubber stamp for Donald. There it is. He is a rubber stamp for Donald Trump policies. Here's the Masters plan. Yep. So if you keep scrolling down, issue number 1. Oh, look at that. America's true MAGA candidate. Make America safe again. Secure the border into legal immigration. Stop the Biden crime wave. All these are rhetoric and talking points of somebody who is a rubber stamp for Donald Trump. And that means and when you're in a purple, like this is another piece to it. Arizona is a very purple state. So he knows his entire political career rests on the approval of Republicans when it comes down to it. Thomas Massie is not going to lose his job. Rand Paul is not going to, like, I'm here in Kentucky now. Like, I can tell you, they don't even campaign. They don't have to. They're not going to lose their job. So they have the ability to stand up to establishment Republicans, to even Trump. And it's not going to cost them their job. Can Blake Masters do that? I don't know. I don't think so. And I think he would just approve everything that the Republicans do. He would go along with the Republican agenda. And we all know that that is not a way to advance liberty.
Now, really quick, to be fair, they did try a primary Thomas Massie. Liz Cheney actually gave money to his primary opponent, and I think they found out that he had given, or he posted some like racist tweets or something like that. So they ended up pulling out of the race. But anyways, they did try. But to your point, I mean,
they tried, stood no chance. It was brutal, and it looks the same when he runs in the generals. It is a brutal declaration that you are not. If they run, it's their seat. And so Blake Masters is not in that position. He has to toe the line. He has to be obedient to the Republican establishment. And that has been an antithesis to liberty in the past. So that's why I don't like throwing our weight behind him. While it may be worthy of a vote and making a choice in a state that is purple and an election that's going to be close, it's not worth splitting the liberty movement and saying, yeah, we're going to throw our weight behind this guy. You know what I mean?
So so make sure we're all speaking the same lingo, right? So a lot of your critiques here, I'll say, not even really criticism, but more just kind of minor critiques, is the terminology, right? Not so much saying, hey, listen, if you're going to vote for him, go vote for him. Say you're dropping out, whatever, but like, don't go and open-throatedly endorse the guy. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not even necessarily just what Marc Victor did. You know, I've never really been a huge fan of Marc Victor. If you ever get a chance to listen to one of his speeches, I encourage you not to. It is painful. It's one of the worst things I've ever had to listen to. But either way, my whole point is like this liberty movement believing that these MAGA Republicans are our people, our team, and they can talk down their nose and go, this was a great choice for principles over party. Where is the line? Like, where do we say that this isn't good enough to get our backing to where we back away and don't challenge you? And I just don't think that's
a great question. And I think to answer that question, let's go to Kenny, because Kenny, obviously, you're spending a lot of time in the world kind of not just liberty movement, but also you do spend a lot of time speaking to a lot of the MAGA folks. So I think you maybe have a chance to talk a little bit more about what you're seeing as you're engaging in that world a little bit more. So talk to some of Jeremy's concerns. You know, when you look at, obviously, President Trump is a very polarizing figure in not just the GOP, but in America, but in the GOP specifically, he still has a lot of pull. And you see, you know, I think Jeremy does rightfully point out, Blake has been pandering a lot to kind of that MAGA Republican Trump endorsed kind of approach. Does that lead some concern? And is there some merit behind the concern that maybe Blake will just be a rubber stamp for some of those establishment folks that we're a little concerned about just from the onset, like the McConnells of the world, the Lindsey Grahams of the world, and the likes?
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that I love to capitalize on this argument, on this conversation, if you scroll a little bit more down Blake's page, when you go to like the Make America Safe Again portion, one of the first things that you see in terms of making sure that America has strong and smart national defense, the first sentence says, he calls out the military-industrial complex. You're not going to see that on any establishment Republican's national defense or foreign policy page. That is just the truth. And while he is trying to appeal to independents, while he was trying to appeal to Republicans to come and show out for him, this is the same guy who has been suffering.
Be under that third point, right there.
One. Yep, right there. And then, let's see. I actually may have it on. Go back up to one. It's the last tab.
Right. Yeah, and if this guy, expand it, there it is.
Yep. So in that first sentence, he says that he will protect us from the stupidities of the military-industrial complex.
Yep.
And another point in regards to the establishment republicanism that we kind of go into in terms of establishment politics. Blake Masters and J.D. Vance are two of the only Republicans in the entire country, be them incumbents or be them nominees, that have said they will vote against Mitch McConnell for majority leader. So you're having somebody who is an anti-establishment candidate who is literally polling third or fourth. And I admit that Blake Masters absolutely capitalized on the MAGA movement in order to win that primary. He did, and he succeeded. But he has not backed off on the point that he would not vote Mitch McConnell for majority leader. He has not capitalized on the point of aligning with the rest of the Republicans and voting for Ukrainian aid. All but nine senators in the U.S. Senate as a whole voted for the Ukrainian aid package. I thank God that two of my senators, and Bill Hagerty and Marshall Blackburn, were the only state delegation in the country that didn't. But to compare Masters with some of the established Republicans that we were seeing across the country, I just don't think is genuine. You know, I saw that interview with Marc Victor. Like, as soon as he announced that he was going to be endorsing Blake Masters, I took the liberty of watching his video and watching his interview. And it does not sound like to me that he has the beliefs of establishment Republicans like Mitt Romney, or even those like, let's just say Marco Rubio. I mean, yes, he said quotes like libertarian does not work, but he explained that quote to Marc Victor in regards to libertarianism is amazing in theory, and it's an establishment from where we should believe that government should work. But to get anything done and to fight back against already governmental overreach that has suffered our society, and to keep the citizens suffered from COVID-19, the way that we do that is use the little bit of government that we do have to fight back against cultural Marxism, and fight back against COVID lockdowns, fight back against federal government overreach. You have to have a little bit of government and be able to, in order to do that, to fight back against what has already been done through authoritarianism. So it's hard for me to say that, yeah, I mean, I agree that yes, with any Republican politician that is running for the U.S. Senate, no matter what, there will always be a concern that they are going to be subjected to establishment politics by the Mitch McConnells of the world, by the Rick Scotts of the world, and even by the Donald Trumps of the world. But the U.S. Senate needs an anti-establishment politician and an anti-establishment Republican like Blake Masters, because unlike in the House, where there are so many MAGA Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, and Thomas Massie, who vote pretty much in line with each other. I know that a lot of people don't like to give credit to Greene, Gaetz, or Boebert for their votes as much as they do Massie, but I've talked to Massie myself while I was in D.C., and these are the people that he is giving the most amount of credit to in being a libertarian. The populists of this movement, the MAGA Republicans of this movement, are the ones that are the most libertarian, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, are doing more libertarian-leaning things in terms of legislation than any libertarian or any Republican in the entire country, be it at the state legislative level or the local level. So in my opinion, I think that endorsing somebody like Masters in a swing state like that has been done, and when he has actually had a conversation that has sustained his endorsement, he has had this conversation. He pointed out the criticisms and the things that Masters has said in the past, such as that libertarianism quote in his interviews and his speeches, when he calls him out and asks him to explain himself, and he still thinks that this guy's worthy of endorsement, and me dropping out and kind of guiding my voters, hopefully over to Masters, is going to benefit the liberty movement. I think it's a great decision. And I know that's very biased for me. I am a GOP county chairman. Okay. I've ran Republican campaigns and I promote the GOP on a national scale. And I'll go and be honest with you, I'm so anti-establishment that podcasts like this are the only ones that I'm invited on, because a lot of the GOP hates my criticism so much. So this is what I have to do in order to appeal to my Republicans, is appear on podcasts like this. But I am thankful that people like Dave Smith, people like Marc Victor exist, because they have the ultimate goal in mind, which is human liberty. And if that is the goal, if that is the true goal, then we have to do stuff like this. You all have to do stuff like this. And I think Victor really accomplished a W today. I think even igniting this debate in the LP, and I'm glad to see it happen. I'm glad to see Dave Smith and Justin Amash go back and forth. I'm glad to see Victor start so many conversations in the LP. All in all, I think some people are mad about it, and I understand why, especially because the timing a week before the election. That's one of the criticism I am willing to say. He should have done this a month ago, even as a GOP guy. I wish he would have done this a long time ago, because it may have affected polling and may have got Masters more funding if he saw that he may have been up or closer in polling because of Victor's dropout. But I think overall this is a win for the LP and the GOP. And I think that it creates the conversation of what is the ultimate goal, and are these avenues the right ways? And I think a lot of them are, like in Victor's case.
And really quick, I do want to address one misnomer that was brought out there on social media, of course. Misinformation already on Twitter, Elon, what the hell? And it was this was a ballot access race. It was not. There was specific rules. Actually, the Arizona Libertarian Party addressed this on their own. Like, they specifically said this is not, thank God, a ballot access race. So that's one positive there. But two, I think we all are on board. Like, yeah, the timing sucks. A week before the election. Come on. Like, let's at least be more smart here. But I guess let's go back to the main
can I pivot?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Jeremy. Yeah, go ahead.
So what do you think about Georgia?
Who, me or Kenny?
Kenny. Let's talk about Georgia, the Senate race as well as the governor race.
So, I mean, Kemp is an incumbent, And Kemp is Georgia's a historically Republican state. I mean, they've got a Republican-led legislature, a Republican state Senate. You know, I think Kemp has been able to get a lot of Republican policies done. And then you have a celebrity like Herschel Walker, who has a lot of scandals, who has been a lot of controversies. And then you have an incumbent Democrat like Raphael Warnock. I mean, in my prediction, I think it goes to a runoff in December. I think neither candidate gets above 50%, very similarly to what it was in 2020 with Ossoff and Warnock running against Loeffler and Perdue. I think eventually Walker pulls it out. And I think probably I'm guessing your question is going to relate to Shane Hazel in terms of his involvement in the Senate. In that same regard, you know, I mean, Hazel come out today, I think, or today or yesterday, and basically admonished Victor's decision to do what he did. I think that Hazel is a really good debater. I think he sells liberty really, really well. I think having him in the race is good. I think it's a good thing overall, especially if it's not a multiple person race like Loeffler was facing when Doug Collins was running in that election as well. But ultimately, I think it's a good thing. I think that Hazel, you know, challenges the status quo a bit. And if the election is more than likely going to go to a runoff anyway, it's good to have Hazel to push at least Walker there, especially if it's a Democrat running. If it's a Democrat, if it's Kemp or anybody else, the entire conversation around Kemp, the entire conversation around the Senate, I think having Hazel there as a voice, especially when Kemp is so far ahead in the polling, it wouldn't matter who he ran against. I think it creates the conversation of that Kemp can do a lot more better things if he is in that conversation.
Right. So how would you feel specifically if GOP members came out and endorsed Shane Hazel for governor over Kemp?
So if there was incumbent, so you're talking about former GOPers or current incumbents?
Well,
I think there's a difference.
Well, just like current members of prominent members of the GOP coming out and saying, "Hey, look, Brian Kemp is an establishment hack. He locked people in their homes. He's not a good governor for the state of Georgia. You should vote for Shane Hazel."
I would disagree with it ultimately. Yeah, immediately.
Okay, so this is ultimately, Brian, where my biggest gripe with the GOP comes from. This is a one-sided relationship. And that is that they will preach to Libertarian Party members about how you should make choices of principles over party. Don't just vote along party lines. But then they're incapable of doing the same thing.
Hey, pause. We'll give credit to
that's ultimately where my frustration with this ordeal with Marc Victor comes from.
But hey, I will give credit where credit's due. One candidate has done that, one elected official, and that was Rand Paul. And you know where he did it? In New Mexico. And you know who he did it with? Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
That did happen.
100%. And again, the exceptions always come to two gentlemen. Thomas Massey, Rand Paul. They 100%. Are the two exceptions to the rule. And that's why I'm having this conversation about where do we draw this line? Because if let's say hypothetically, Nikki Haley comes out of nowhere and wins the presidential nomination in 2024. Trump and DeSantis eat each other alive, and she sneaks in the back door. Who do you think Blake Masters is going to endorse for president? Dave Smith? No. He's going to come to bat for Nikki Haley.
And I would too.
No. Nope. We lost Jeremy.
Oh, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, no, and I think he actually does have a really good point as we're waiting for Jeremy
to
pop back in. Yeah, because he does. You do see this quite a bit where it is one-sided. And I think there's Jeremy. I think it's almost
lost my internet there. But
no, you're good.
What I'm frustrated with is this one-sided relationship where the Libertarian Party is expected to bow down when somebody is good enough rather than continue to make the fight. And we're the ones who have to sacrifice when they're more than happy to endorse establishment hacks, neocons over LP candidates. And I'm frustrated with that.
Hey, Jeremy, what would you say the line is then? I'm curious, what do you see? Let's say, for example, it is a Thomas Massey. It is a Rand Paul. Obviously, I wouldn't want to run a Libertarian against them. But if it was Lindsey Graham or if it was John McCain, no questions asked, run a Libertarian all day long. Because then I think also it gives us a chance to differentiate more effectively. And it's like if I'm going in a sales role here, I'm trying to compete against, let's say a telecom vendor. I don't want to talk to, or I don't want to necessarily talk to the things that we're similar about. I want to focus on what's the thing that I know we do better.
And like as we get to the more liberty camp, I guess, so you look at like your freedom score, your liberty score, anything like 80 or above, like there's room for improvement, but I would say you are a friend to liberty. So like for me, and I know it's so arbitrary, like what's that score? How do you base that score? But like at least then I'm trying to like look to see, okay, there's something we can base that on. But for you, what would you say you would look to?
Do you do something that's unpopular amongst Republicans in order to defend liberty? That's the measurement for me. And I don't trust that Blake Masters will do that.
And that's completely fair. You know, one thing that I differ from though is I think that it's very true that you have to look at the viable candidates and you have to look at those who are worth the endorsement, as you said. Are you truly worth it to say I endorse this guy to give him more of a chance at being a Democrat, right? One thing I did in 2000, I forget if it was, I guess it was 2020 when New Mexico's Senate election was up, and I think it's Martin Heinrich is his name in New Mexico, when Gary Johnson was running for the Senate then as a Libertarian, as a former governor. And he had a neocon Senate nominee. I went on Twitter and I said, the Republican needs to drop out and he needs to endorse Gary Johnson. I think those battles are worth it. I absolutely think those battles, when I think the Libertarian has a chance of winning, when I think that they have a viable path forward to actually defeat the Democrat, absolutely. I wish Ricky Dale Harrington, I'll be honest, and this would be unpopular amongst a lot of people, I wish Ricky Dale Harrington would have beat Tom Cotton in the general election, because I disagree with Tom Cotton a lot more than I disagree with Ricky Harrington. However, I think and I'm not asking the Libertarian Party at all in any shape or form to endorse somebody that they adamantly disagree with. But I'm going to go ahead and ask this question: if Blake Masters isn't good enough, I don't know who will be. I don't know any Libertarian candidates or any Republican candidates.
Rand Paul, gentlemen, I'm going to vote for.
But those men and Ron Paul, who is the father of modern libertarianism, have endorsed this guy. And he has went on shows and explained his positions in detail. I know his campaign website may not be held up to what a lot of people think and a lot of people like. And I know he embraced Trump during the primary. But if this guy who has read Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises and been raised on these values and has been endorsed,
Kenny, like he's walked
I think
away
he left the Libertarian. I think there's a difference between leaving the Libertarian Party and aligning with the Libertarian Party values, and then seeing the path forward through the Republican Party, just like Justin Amash did.
Yeah, no. I'm not talking about party. I'm talking about him stating that libertarianism is not going to get us where we want to go, and we should use state power. I think. And by the way, I want to address this misnomer, and I know I'm talking over you. I want you to finish, but this idea that libertarianism doesn't fight back against leftism is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my entire life. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We're the only way to fight back. Republicans are trying to get in a fist fight with left wingers and going, you know what? If I'm going to beat them, I need steroids. But then the Democrats go, okay, well, then I get steroids too. Well, you just gave your opponent steroids to get stronger and faster. Libertarians are the ones saying, let's cut everybody's arms off, right? So that you guys we want to gut the power. And the GOP tends to have a conversation about wanting to use it like you have to use it to defeat leftism. No, you should use your power to gut the power. Then they have no ability to enforce this cultural Marxism you're speaking of.
Okay, and that's a great criticism. But a lot of my questions rely on what is gutting the power. Like, is that abolishing federal departments? If that's one of the then Blake Masters come out today on Marc Victor's show and said he would abolish the Department of Education, abolish the FBI, abolish the CIA. But that's really my question though. Is he has said libertarian is not the path forward. And even I disagree with that. I do. I know I'm a populist, and I think that the state power, like used by Ron DeSantis and others, I think is perfectly fine and good at the state level. But I think that there's too high of a bar to meet oftentimes, and that's a perfect. I think that's the reason that Jeremy, you, Brian, and a bunch of people who watch this podcast are a part of the Libertarian Party, because I think the bar that you set, and I think it's very admirable. I'll go ahead and admit, I think it's very admirable, and I wish I could get there. I really wish that I was libertarian as you all are, and believing that the third party venture and the third party journey is the way to enact liberty and the way to cut down on federal government, but it's not. It just isn't, and it never will be. And I hate to break the news like that, because I am so fond of so many Libertarian people, so Libertarian Party people. I love Brian, Jeremy. I like you, and I like so many members of the LP. And I'll go ahead and tell you too, I am glad when the LP candidates challenge the status quo and challenge establishment Republican candidates, because they create the conversation on foreign policy when they get to a debate stage, and they're there challenging the neocon foreign policy, the high spending in states, the high spending of the federal government. When they're on stage and they're the only candidates saying that, then I absolutely want them up there. But the problem is when somebody like Masters, who to me has met that bar, they have at least met that minimum. And if I was an LP person, I think that he would meet those requirements. And I know there's plenty in the LP who don't believe he meets that, including yourself. And I'm not sure about what Brian thinks. But when he meets the bar for Rand Paul, when he meets the bar for Thomas Massey, and when he meets the bar for Ron Paul, who again is the father of modern libertarianism, has been a Libertarian Party nominee, and has also been in the GOP as an incumbent congressman and a GOP presidential candidate. When he thinks enough, and when Gary Johnson thinks enough of those in New Mexico that he has chosen to endorse, I think that you have to look to those men who have been part of both the two-party system and the third-party viable system, and trying to see what are these men saying, what are the conversations they have had when they've done in-depth interviews with this man. I think that he meets that bar. And I don't really understand the argumentation of not. Like, I get it. I want the Republicans to be better. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing and writing when I'm writing and being active where I'm active. But I think there comes a point where purism is too high of a bar to meet, and sometimes you have to be willing to say that's enough, and he should.
I have a question. And this is for Jeremy. I think Kenny does raise a good point. So, like, let's go to hypothetical 2023, right? Let's fun world. Blake Masters is now the sitting Arizona US Senator, and there's a vote to axe, let's say, IRS, Department of Education, and the DHS, right? And he's voting yes on all of them. Yeah. And yet he then votes for, I don't know, name your not libertarian idea. Or
legalizing marijuana or decriminalizing marijuana.
Boots on the ground in Taiwan.
Something, right? Sure. Something, right? But like, when would libertarians be like, there is an objective good from him, along with an objective bad, but we can take the objective bad with the objective good?
So,
am I making sense?
Like I said, I would vote for him if I still lived in Arizona. Luckily, I get to vote for someone better, and so. But ultimately, I think those are where coalitions can be built, right? But this is not a coalition. Like, we can, there are plenty of Republicans and Democrats that the LP and Libertarians are happy to build effective coalitions with. This is not what we're discussing. What we're discussing is saying we are going to abandon why we exist because this man is good enough to uphold our values and our principles for us. And so ultimately, like I said, when push comes to shove, it's that I don't trust Blake Masters to stand up to an unpopular position from Trump the way that Massey did and the way that Rand Paul has in the past. And that's what I'm looking for, somebody who will grandstand essentially against what's popular, and until that bar is met, then we will continue, hopefully, to fight against that.
Well, and let me ask this, because then we get into the of course the lesser of two evils question, of course, and this is where I do think though we have to look at reality that it's probably going to be Masters or Kelly, right? And I know to your point, you said yes, you would vote for him. But also, like, when you're looking at the reality of the situation, like, yeah, you can support somebody who would push them, but they're not going to win. And listen, I think I've been one of the best shows to have a platform for libertarian candidates. I've had probably half dozen in the past 2 weeks, and I give them all a platform because I think we need to be there as an alternative voice to push, in many cases, the GOP to be better. But only in those very rare cases do we see libertarians actually facing a real chance to have electoral success. So I say all that to say, when we look at states like Arizona, for example, in this case, where let's just say we get 75% positive with Blake Masters, I can almost guarantee with what we've seen with Mark Kelly, that number is going to be in the low, 30s or 40s.
Oh, yeah.
So
probably
like,
zero. Probably zero.
Right.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
objectively speaking, and I think this goes to kind of your point, Jeremy, with the coalition building, is that we have to be more strategic in the way that we approach not just like selling our ideas, but also in the way that we're impacting real people's lives. And here's my reasoning behind that, is because if we're not showing people a real viable path to get liberty in their own lives, agnostic of party, then we're going to have a hard time getting them to trust us to actually earn their vote, regardless of how good we do reaching them on the issues they care about. But I think if we can acknowledge in those situations, like, yeah, you are better off, and like just saying the uncomfortable truth, you're going to probably be better off as a Arizona resident voting for Blake Masters than Mark Kelly. And in this case, if you want to see that 75% of what you agree with actually go into policy, and how much of that will go into policy, that's the question, right? And I think that's on the voters of Arizona to hold him accountable. But will they? And that's where I guess, to the question of trust,
that's
Jeremy,
my point.
I know there's definitely a question of trust. And I think it's absolutely well earned. But I will tell you what, man, like, and this is just from me, sitting here in Indiana now, like, I would much rather have someone who is at least like they know who the person Rothbard is versus out being in Pennsylvania. If it was like Mehmet Oz, he's not going to know who Rothbard is. He likely doesn't even know like the basics of libertarianism, but at least Blake knows that stuff. So like, I guess
there's no question that Blake is far and above your average Republican. I'm not here to debate that he's not better than most. The question is, like, do we reward bad behavior? And in this situation, like, he's able to get away with a lot of Trump calling cards, and we just excuse it because he could win, and that's good enough, whereas if we were, as a party and as a movement, really able to say, no, look, this is not good enough, and we are going to ruin this election for you if you do not shape up. Because to my knowledge, he hasn't changed his position on anything when it comes down to it. He hasn't made any concessions. He hasn't said, I will stop being X that libertarians disagree with. We haven't held his feet to the fire. We haven't gotten Blake Masters to be better on liberty in order to drop out, which I'm perfectly fine with, but those concessions don't exist. And so if we continue to reward the Republican Party with dropping out and endorsing their candidates simply because they were 60 or 70% good, that's my question. Where is the line? Because at the end of the day, we have to be able to do what happened in Georgia last cycle and teach them that, hey, listen, you are going to listen to us. You are going to adopt our ideas, or we are going to run the 3% that makes the difference. And as long as, we lose our power, in my opinion, when we back off and we don't do that. So that's my take on it. Yes, can it have potentially negative repercussions on liberty in the short term? Sure. But run better candidates, damn it. Like, that's our point. That's the entire purpose of the LP. If you had Thomas Massey's and Rand Paul's everywhere in the Republican Party, we would not need to exist. But that's not the reality. So until that becomes a reality, we are going to continue to challenge that.
Kenny, you're championing the bit. There you go.
Yeah. And so my issue again, though, and the question, I think the question of where is the line is the same for me. Where is this threshold ever going to be met? Like you were talking about two incumbents who have been in office for 10 years. Mm-hmm. You're talking about two incumbents that have been in office for 10 years, and you've had other Congress people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has embraced Shane Hazel, who has literally promoted him on Twitter and said it's a good thing he's running because he's promoting libertarian values. Yep. You have Gates, You have
That wasn't exactly what she said, but she basically said what I just said, and that is that if Republicans don't get their crap together,
absolutely,
Libertarians deserve to continue to keep you out of office.
Absolutely. And you've had these candidates the last 10 years. I don't know. My problem is, and it's the same question, where is the line? I think there is too high of a standard of where that line is ever going to be met. I think somebody who is endorsed, again, by Ron Paul, by Thomas Massey, and by Rand Paul, his son, and now Dave Smith and Marc Victor, if those 5 endorsements, and you've convinced those people to vote for you and to endorse you and to promote you and tell people to vote for you, if that person who is endorsed by those 5 people is not going to be promoted by the Libertarian Party and is not going to have concessions, I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And if that is the question, if the ceiling is that high and if the line is that high, I don't see how even the concession of we need to run better candidates. I don't know if there's a Libertarian Republican in the world, in a swing state in Arizona, that you can run rather than Blake Masters. I have a huge problem in finding that person. Like
I get what you're saying, but I'm in the Libertarian Party of Kentucky, and we have a hands-off policy on on a congressman and a senator. It is hands off. We do not run candidates against him, bar none, flat out. So those exist. Man, and Blake could have gotten there. He was 1 or 2 steps away from reaching that threshold. I had hopes for it. But if you want to talk about potentially putting boots on the ground over Taiwan, you want to talk about taxing people to build border walls, and then you throw in the fact that you include a lot of Trump campaign rhetoric. I mean, I don't know why we get anything different with you. If Trump gets reelected in 2024, we get what we got for 4 years, which was from liberty, which was record spending in the history of the U.S. government under MAGA Republicans. They are not libertarians.
And I understand that. So one question: when did he say the boots on the ground for Taiwan thing? I'm not saying
it's more about the hawkishness with China. We got to get tough on China, XYZ. But if you like, there is a difference though, Jeremy. I'll take back boots on the ground in Taiwan. But either way, get tough on China, by far our top geopolitical rival. What does that mean? Because anytime we go in that direction of get tough on XYZ country, we know where it leads. We know what that propaganda eventually leads to. We're not talking. Are we talking about tariffs? That's awful. Are we talking about economic sanctions? Well, that leads to war, right? So what are we getting tough on? What other than eventually, like, because that sounds to me, if China flies planes over Taiwan, Blake Masters is more than happy to shoot them down.
So to me, I mean, I've talked about that. I forgot where I talked about this. I don't know if it was during a podcast or whatever. To me, it automatically. Oh, I'll tell you what it was. The U.S. was talking about banning TikTok, right? Like that's been a huge conversation in banning an application that is owned by the CCP, that is owned by a communist government that is stealing information and privacy information from our citizens. And it's also about how the CCP is in the top 2 to 3 farmland owners in the United States and owning farmland. I think those are 2 things that Masters have both talked about in allowing businesses to thrive here that are owned by the Chinese Communist Party to align with Bill Gates and be the largest farm owners in the United States, and a communist government to be able to buy private land ownership, and those who are owned and operated, businesses that are owned and operated by the Chinese government being allowed to buy farmland for practically no reason rather than to benefit the Chinese Communist Party in the United States. Those are 2 things that Masters has talked about that shouldn't be allowed. So when I hear that Masters would have opposed Ukrainian aid funding, when I hear that he was supported Afghanistan withdrawal, when I hear that he would not support boots on the ground anywhere unless provoked, I don't see where that line is even drew anywhere besides
when he
things
talks
that he's
about
actually
defense,
talked about China policy.
He doesn't just talk about American defense. He talks about in defense of the U.S. and its allies. So right now that would include Saudi Arabia, meaning he would send support for the war in Yemen right now. If a NATO country was attacked by Russia, that would mean that he would invoke Article 5 and support sending of our troops to fight a war in Eastern Europe. And so that's what I mean, man. Like, the bar is high, but I don't think it's too high.
And the bar may be high, but I think you have to see more evidence. Like this is a dude who has openly promoted anti-interventionist foreign policy. Like, he has said that we should not be involved in the Middle East. He has said that we should not be involved in Ukraine. Pretty much the two biggest proxy wars of the last 10 to 20 years. He has said we should not have boots aground. We should not have boots on the ground in any capacity in those two wars. But we are kind of stretching, saying, well, he has said this, but he may do this since he has said this basis. I think that is where I think the line is drawn far too high, is because he has said a basic thing that we have to stand with our allies automatically means that he would support the war in Yemen, or that he would put boots on the ground in Taiwan. I think that is the stretch that I have a huge problem with, when he has openly advocated against established Republican neoconservative policy, like those, again, who just recently, all but 9 senators voted for Ukrainian aid and voted for to give them more money and to send weapons over there. And I disagreed with that, and I'm willing to call it a Republican that did it, when he is willing to say I would have been number 10 on that. And when he has said that the two wars that have cost us the most amount of American lives, that has cost us the most amount of taxpayer money, when he has said he would oppose those two things, for us to take generic statements, at least either said on his campaign website with Israel and our allies, and then to expand upon that and say, because he said this basic argument, he is going to do this, when we have seen no evidence or no straight statement that he would put boots on the ground, not only in Taiwan or in wherever the other country that you said. I don't believe that that's fair. To be quite honest, I don't believe that's fair. I think you have to take it on the basis of specific policies of what he has said, the anti-interventionist positions that he has taken, and look at that to his foreign policy, and take him to task if he does mess up, which, again, he said at the end of his podcast. Marc Victor said, if you cross me, if you say anything and do anything that I promise you my endorsement, I promise you my support. If you do anything, you got to be willing to be saying, I called you out for this, and that you need to be held accountable. Blake Masters says, bring it, and please hold me accountable. Somebody like that, who has supported libertarian positions like he can. Again, I just think the line and the ceiling is far too high for not only for you, Jeremy, but for a lot of your party. I just don't see how
Blake Masters. Hopefully, Blake Masters will get 4 years to prove that he is more like Massey and Rand Paul, and less like the other MAGA rubber stamps who do good things. And I'm fine with coalitions, and I'm fine with supporting them. But I am not ready to say this man is, or more people, because this is ultimately the concern. I cannot draw a significant distinction between Ron DeSantis's policies on his page, if he runs for president, and what Blake Masters has said his policy positions are. And so if we run a candidate against Ron DeSantis in 2024, and I put my feet on the ground and I go campaign for a Dave Smith or a Spike Cohen or a Justin, whoever, right? I go campaign for them. The precedent has now been set that this is the bar. That this is all that need be met in order, is that you've read some Rothbard and Mises, right? And I just don't think that's enough for us to continue bowing out and saying, okay, good enough.
All right, we're going to have to go ahead and get ready to wrap things up there. So we're going to go to final thoughts. My final thought is libertarians. This is for us. I think we should be more strategic. So let's say, for example, Chuck Schumer. Did you know he's running for re-election right now, guys, up in New York?
No.
Yeah, I didn't either. And guess what? I don't think anybody else knows that either. So I saw there was a debate apparently against some no-name Republican. Hey, libertarians, if you're looking for a great candidate to go up and run up there and actually make a difference, there you go. Go to New York. Lee Zeldin is doing a really good job differentiating himself with Kathy Hochul. Where's the Republican, or I'm sorry, where's the Libertarian running as a foil to Chuck Schumer and the no-name Republican who's obviously not doing a good job? I don't know her name, know his name. I don't even know if it's a guy or a girl for that matter, or if they are a guy or a girl. It's 2022, Brian. Get it right. So with that being said, yeah, it's on us to start playing like the game more strategically, more smart. Put our money in races that we can actually make a difference, and do so against areas where the other team, whether it's the red team or the blue team, really doesn't have much of a standing. In New York, if you look at the voter demographics, it's predominantly Democratic. And yet Lee Zeldin's having a chance right now to win because he's meeting people where they're at on the issues they care about, specifically the lockdowns, with Kathy Hochul being one of the worst governors in response to after Cuomo left, the governor who was grabbing fannies. Yeah, that was always fun. Grabbing fannies and killing grannies. Andrew Cuomo story. But no, then you go to Kathy Hochul, and now you have Lee Zeldin, who's able to differentiate himself on those specific issues. God, if there was a libertarian up there who was able to do that, we would have a real good shot of getting more eyeballs on a campaign and get more success for Libertarian Party, make it easier for Larry Sharpe in the future. I mean, heck, I would love to see Larry if he had run for U.S. Senate, but he's unfortunately running for governor in a race where now it's looking like it's going to be the Republican insurgents, right? Which I think is a good thing, right? That's a good step in the right direction for New York. Now it's opening the door for a libertarian to push that even further. So that's my final thoughts. Jeremy, what's your final thoughts for us? Then we'll go to Kenny.
I completely agree with your final thoughts, and I don't think we're far apart here on strategy. That the LP has limited resources. We should focus it where we can make the greatest impact. And if I had been in Arizona, I would have advised Marc Victor not to run in this race. It's as simple as that. It wasn't a great strategy with where we're at now, but it is certainly not a precedent that we should continue to use moving forward. This was not necessarily the right decision based on principle. But it was based on situation. And so if we want to look at it that way, I'm not as upset. But the Libertarian Party has a unique position to continue to stick its nose in places and force people to either be better and deal with us or lose. And that's where we are today. But that is not where I believe we always will be. If we continue to do the job of selling liberty, of winning people over to these ideas. And I'll steal its quote from Dave Smith that I think goes against kind of what he did in this Masters race. At a certain point, we have to stop convincing people that we're like them and convince them that they should be like us. And that's what I would like to see us do more of in the future.
Kenny, Cody, final thoughts.
I mean, I enjoyed this conversation a lot because it's a conversation that I've had a lot on Twitter, especially. But some of the problems that I find, I'm still probably going to find no matter what. And there's going to be belief systems that both of you all take away from this conversation, regardless of the conversation. And my 2 points are, one, I think that you have to know the situation, as Brian said, and know when to act, know when to run people. And I think the bar is too high for a lot in the LP right now. I think Masters it's just my own personal opinion. I think people like Masters are what the Republican Party needs to be formed after. Those like Rand Paul, Masters, Gates, and a bunch of others. And two, I think that when Republicans are trying to make that coalition, I think a lot of the time people are giving them the Heisman stiff arm for some reason. Never really understood that. I was on Twitter the other day, and me and the Representative Jeremy Fajan, who's one of the most libertarian-leaning state legislators in the country, were kind of questioning, why did LibP runs people like Victor against Blake Masters? And this person's response was, you blocked ballot access when Jeremy Fajan sponsored ballot access in Tennessee and got it passed, and at least tried to get it passed. So this idea that it's always has to be anti-GOP, and this idea that when coalitions are trying to be made that we are rejected, even though sometimes we are giving credit to those who are helping our cause and who are helping our conversations, like we are having in the MAGA America First wing of the Republican Party that I'm a part of. I give a lot of credit to all the LP people and a lot of the LP guys for creating conversations and holding the neoconservative warmongers accountable that are currently in the GOP and dominate the GOP, unfortunately, that I'm trying to change. But I think that coalitions like the one Victor has made with Masters and coalitions like we have on this podcast are what the conversations and the direction of both parties need to be. And I'm afraid that a lot of the ceilings and the lines people are drawing are far too high for those coalitions to exist, and I hope that changes.
All right, folks. Well, if you got some value from today's episode, please do me a favor. Go ahead and give it a share. And also, I want to hear your thoughts. So please, if you're joining us over on YouTube, Rumble, or Odyssey, leave your thoughts down below in the comments. Guys, I don't think we could have had a more lively conversation unless we talked about who was better, Tennessee football or Alabama football. But we're not going to I'm not going to get into that one. I know that's going to
go Vols this weekend, baby.
We all know the answer.
I know. I
GBO.
15 versus 11, or 16
all I had
versus
to do
11.
was just strike
all
that powder keg. That's all it took to get you guys going there. No, thank you for both bringing your insights to the episode today, guys. And frankly, like, this is a conversation a lot of folks are having right now. And I think you both articulated both ideas and perspectives extremely well. And I appreciate both of your bringing those views to the table today. I find myself, I think, kind of again saying, why not both? I find myself in both camps saying, yeah, we absolutely need to have libertarians there pushing the other two parties. But at the same point in time, libertarians, let's be smart when we're running these elections and try to be more effective in building these coalitions. I think we will find more success. And I thank you, Kenny, for pointing out, yeah, I hope we're setting a good example here at the Brian Nichols Show of how we can effectively do that. I have folks on the show who are running for office as big L libertarians, who are small business owners, entrepreneurs, economists, activists, all across the board, sales and marketing professionals. And the vision is to be able to bring these people together on common issues that we've all come to understand. That is greater liberty movement stuff, right? The ideas of not hurting people, not taking their stuff, basic economics, and really at the end of the day, property rights. So let's embrace those ideas and find where we can have more success building those relationships. So guys, thank you for doing your part here and having that conversation. And folks, if you got some value, not only can you join us here on the video version, also head to briannicholsshow.com. You can find today's podcast version of the show and all 615 other episodes of the program, which, by the way, includes we have Cody's Concerns, where we've had Cody joining us here in the program, and also Sell Liberty. Jeremy, new season of Sell Liberty is coming out soon,
yeah,
right?
new season. We will be filming next week. The studio is set up in my basement finally. We've got some new digs, and we'll have a co-host and a little different format for you guys, so I'm looking forward to it.
Digging it, man. I'm looking forward to getting Sell Liberty back on the book. So, folks, make sure you've hit subscribe everywhere you get your podcasts. And also, we include the Sell Liberty podcast right here in the Brian Nichols Show RSS feed, so you can find that very easily. And by the way, folks, did you know if you want to go ahead and support the program, there's a couple different ways you can do that. Number one, head to briannicholsshow.com/support. Number one, become a Patreon supporter, $5 a month over there. Or number two, you can go ahead and do a one-time donation, $5, $10, $20, whatever it may be. It all goes right back here into the program. And then the other way you can go ahead and support the program is by going to briannicholsshow.com/shop, where you can go ahead and support our amazing partner over at Proud Libertarian, but also you can get some awesome Liberty swag. I've been busy, boys. I've been behind the scenes working my graphic design self to the bone. And with that out came our Liberty Legend shirt, no Mark's shirt. We have our Magic Money Tree shirt, and we have a bunch of other ones as well. So please, folks, if you want to go ahead, check those out. They make great Christmas gifts, which is right around the corner now that we're officially in November. So go ahead to briannicholsshow.com/shop and use code TBNS at checkout for a discount applied to your order. All right, with that being said, that's all we have for you. Thank you for joining us. And by the way, make sure if you did not check out our awesome conversation yesterday with Matt Hackenberg, libertarian running for governor out in Pennsylvania. Look at that, me promoting libertarian candidates. Go ahead, check it out. I'll include it right here below. But otherwise, we'll talk to you tomorrow. It's Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show. We'll see you.
Listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.